Behind every glamorous pose on the red carpet lay a pass to places where cameras were forbidden. The estates in the hills weren't just residences. They were strongholds where everything prohibited became allowed. While film companies promoted virtue and decency in movies, stars lived lives that would have shattered their professions if the facts ever came out. Invitations showed up in plain envelopes with no sender information. Rules were left at the entrance, and what occurred inside never got out. Welcome to the genuine Hollywood, where, after the movie ended, the actual performance started. John Simmons. Simmons arrived from England with a heavenly appearance and a charming English accent that made American producers excited. But fitting into Hollywood meant learning its hidden rules. Her events at her Pacific Palisades house began simply as tea gatherings. Her husband, Stuart Granger, arranged to introduce her to the film world. But Granger was a serial cheater who saw every party as a chance to hunt, and Jean quickly understood Hollywood didn't reward purity. The tea parties changed into late-night events where alcohol replaced tea and polite talk turned into bold advances. Howard Hughes pursued her constantly, appearing without an invitation because, as her RKO boss, he technically could. The agreement she signed with Hughes became a gilded cage that kept her waiting for years while he decided her future. Those parties during her waiting period were her only link to the industry. Otto Preminger, Marlon Brando, and Richard Burton all visited her living room during that strange contract situation. Granger cheated openly during their parties, vanishing into upstairs rooms with younger actresses while Jean pretended not to notice. When they finally separated in 1960, the gatherings stopped suddenly. Jean married director Richard Brooks, a man who hated Hollywood's social scene. She lived until 2010, a respected elderly woman who rarely discussed her early California years. Those parties buried deep as a time she preferred to forget. Janet Gaynor. Gaynor received the very first Academy Award for Best Actress in 1929, but that victory came with a cost she paid for many years. Her parties at her Hollywood house were famous for blending established stars with designers, dancers, and artists who existed on the edges of the industry. Her marriage to MGM's costume genius Adrian was a practical partnership. He gained straight respectability, and she gained protection from gossip about her real preferences. Their home became a safe place where people could be themselves at a time when being genuine was risky. Broadway star Mary Martin was a regular visitor, and rumors of a romantic connection with Janet continued for years. The games at her party began harmlessly, but often ended with same-sex pairs disappearing into private rooms. Under the Hays Code, even the smallest suggestion of wrongdoing could end careers, making Janet's home both a shelter and a danger. Charles Frell, her first husband, was also gay. Their marriage, another studio arrangement to protect both reputations. After their divorce, she married Adrian in 1939, repeating the pattern with a new partner. The gatherings continued, perhaps more quietly, but just as risky. Janet outlived Adrian by more than 20 years, dying in 1984 after a car crash. The tales of those nights disappeared with the generation that attended, keeping secrets Hollywood still isn't prepared to confront. June Haver. June Haver was a golden-haired actress that 20th Century Fox advertised as the next Betty Grable. But what she really wanted was to leave the Hollywood system. Her parties before retiring in 1953 to join a religious house were strange combinations of prayer and desire. June invited priests and nuns, along with actors and producers, creating an environment where the sacred and the sinful competed for focus. Fred McMurray, who later became her husband, came often, confused by June's double nature. The gatherings ended early compared to other Hollywood events, not because they were boring, but because June set a strict ending time that puzzled guests used to parties that lasted until morning. Her time in the religious house lasted only 8 months before she returned to Hollywood officially to care for her sick mother. The reality was darker. June found she couldn't escape her inner struggles behind a nun's clothing. Her post-convent parties carried a feeling of making up for something, as if every gathering was a public admission of spiritual failure. She married McMurray in 1954 after his first wife's death, and the parties became boring family meals. The wild crowds stopped getting invitations. June lived until 2005, dying at 79 as a proper widow who had acted as the perfect wife for 50 years. Her death notices never mentioned the strange early 50 nights when she tried to be both holy and sinful at once. Evelyn Keyes. Keyes played Scarlett O'Hara's sister in Gone with the Wind, but in reality, she was far more fascinating than any character she performed. Her parties at her Hollywood apartment were unconventional gatherings filled with writers, rebellious directors, and blacklisted actors during the McCarthy period. Evelyn wasn't afraid of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Her events were as much political as social statements. Her second husband, director John Huston, was a talented drunk, and their loud arguments often ended with police at the door. Visitors would wager on how long it would take before the next shouting match. Her autobiography, Scarlett O'Hara's Younger Sister, published in 1977, revealed relationships that shocked even decades later. Showman Mike Todd, later married to Elizabeth Taylor, was one of her lovers and came to her parties with bags full of money to impress guests. Musician Artie Shaw, who collected wives like instruments, was another. In the 60 seconds, as major film roles disappeared, Evelyn moved to Europe, where the parties were more elegant, but just as wild. She returned to America in the 70 seconds, published her shocking memoirs, and then disappeared from public view. She died in 2008 at 91, one of the last survivors of an era brave enough to tell some truths, though even she admitted she left out the most interesting details. How many famous husbands did she have in total? Rhonda Fleming. Fleming was the ruler of Technicolor, her bright red hair more well-known than some of her movies, but her private life was even more vibrant. Her Bel Air parties in the 50 seconds were brilliant events, where she was always the most beautiful woman in the room. 6 marriages showed she was looking for something she never found, and each husband changed the feeling of her gatherings. Her first husband, actor Tom Lane, drank too much and caused public disturbances. Louis Morrill, a rich doctor, brought respectability but unbearable dullness. His parties were so uninteresting, guests often left early. Her religious conversion in the 60 seconds didn't stop the gatherings, only changed the guest list. Actors were replaced by religious leaders, wine by grape juice, but Rhonda still ruled at the center, arranging every detail. Her third husband, Italian actor Lang Jeffries, cheated openly, a secret everyone knew except her. After their divorce, the parties became religious, filled with hymn singing and talk of redemption. Her fourth husband, stuntman Bob Morgan, who had lost a leg in an on-set accident, inspired her to hold charity events. Rhonda died in 2020 at 97, outliving almost everyone from her time. Her parties changed with her from wild Hollywood nights to prayer meetings, but she was always the star. Faith Domergue. Domergue was a personal find of Howard Hughes, and that connection troubled her career forever. Hughes spent a fortune creating her image and staged fancy parties where Faith was the main attraction. But they weren't really her parties. They were Hughes's productions, and Faith just acted as hostess. Guests knew they were there to impress Hughes, not to get to know her. She smiled, served drinks, while Hughes watched from the shadows, remembering every conversation. Her marriage to Argentine director Hugo Fregonese gave her some freedom, and her gatherings changed their style. No longer organized by Hughes, they became authentic, but no one knew who Faith really was. After years of pretending to be his dream, Hugo's Latin visitors mixed uncomfortably with Hughes's remaining Hollywood group. In the 60 seconds, as her career faded, Faith moved to Europe, holding smaller, more relaxed, but also more desperate parties. She returned to California in the 72nds and lived quietly until her death in 1999. Obituaries remembered her only as Howard Hughes's discovery, reducing her to a side note in a crazy man's life story. The parties he threw in her name were more famous than any she ever held herself. Marie Windsor. Windsor specialized in playing dangerous women in dark films, and her real life reflected those stories. Her gatherings in Van Nuys, far from the luxury of Beverly Hills, attracted a different group: stuntmen, B-movie directors, struggling writers. Marie knew she wasn't a top-tier star, but she made up for it with kindness and genuineness rare in Hollywood. Her husband, Jack Hupp, a yacht seller, added a seafaring touch to the parties, bringing guests directly from the harbor with exciting ocean tales. Her regular work in low-budget films meant she worked constantly, while bigger stars waited for perfect roles. Her parties showed that same working-class energy: no luxury, just laughter, drinks, and people who truly enjoyed each other's company. A young Stanley Kubrick attended during the filming of The Killing and was impressed by how real her gatherings felt compared to exclusive Hollywood events. Marie worked into her 82nds, appearing on television when film parts disappeared. Her parties continued long after others stopped hosting them, simply because she genuinely loved having people around. She died in 2008, respected by those who knew her, though forgotten by mainstream culture. The stories of her nights survive only through stuntmen and character actors who valued that someone of her status treated them as equals. Adele Jurgens. Jurgens was a former dancer who never forgot her variety show background. Her parties in Sherman Oaks were loud, proud celebrations filled with dancers, singers, and showbiz outsiders Hollywood looked down upon. Her husband, Glenn Langan, star of low-budget science fiction films, joined her in hosting theme nights, where guests dressed as monsters or aliens. It was cosplay before cosplay had a name, and the serious actors stayed away, calling them tasteless. But those who went had more fun than anywhere else in Beverly Hills. Her beauty earned her small parts at Columbia Pictures, but limited skills kept her in supporting roles. The parties were compensation for a career that never fully succeeded. If she couldn't be a star on screen, she'd be one at home. A young Marilyn Monroe, still just a model, attended several of Adele's gatherings long before fame found her. Photos from those nights show ambitious, laughing girls, unaware one of them would become a legend. By the 60 seconds, work had disappeared, and the parties ended. Adele lived until 2002, dying at 82 inches quiet anonymity. Her parties are fondly remembered by showbiz people who appreciated that she celebrated Hollywood's less glamorous side. Hollywood built its kingdom on acceptable lies and concealed realities. While studios sold purity and family values in movies, the stars in the hills proved they were as human and imperfect as anyone else. These 8 women hosted parties that revealed more about the real Hollywood than 1,000 films ever could. The next time you watch a classic movie and admire the grace, remember, after the cameras stopped rolling, those same stars removed their makeup and showed their true faces. Follow for more stories moral clauses tried to erase, because the real Hollywood isn't in the films they made. It's in the lives they lived, when no one was watching, or when they thought no one was watching. Someone was always watching, no taking notes, waiting for the right moment to speak.